torrid affair between 16-year-old Amy Fisher and the married 35-year-old Joey Buttafuoco was one of the most infamous scandals in modern history.
He had the wife, and she was going to kill the wife, and the eternal triangle and all that.
The media was all over, the cameras were all over, the reporters were all over.
I mean, just all these different headlines, and the story did not go away.
When their relationship cooled down, the so-called Long Island Lolita focused her scorn on Joey's unsuspecting wife, Mary Jo, and did so with a loaded gun.
I felt an explosion. It felt like somebody had taken a baseball bat and hit me. The aim was to kill me right then and there. I just didn't die.
Mary Jo survived the attempt on her life, and Amy was arrested. Amy Fisher claimed the shooting was an accident.
I was furious. Like, how can you say this? This was an assassination, for God's sake.
Stephen Sleeman, a close friend of Amy Fisher's, claimed the shooting was anything but accidental.
It was definitely premeditated. She thought about it, she wanted to do it.
According to him, months before her own attack on Mary Jo Buttafuoco, Amy Fisher offered him a proposition. In exchange for money and the promise of sex, would he kill her romantic rival?
When she asked me to shoot Mary Jo, I just thought she was bluffing.
But as Stephen Sleeman soon discovered, Amy Fisher was deadly serious.
She meant to kill her. She wanted her dead.
This would-be hitman was involved with not one, but two potential attempts on Mary Jo Buttafuoco's life.
I pulled the trigger twice and put 2 rounds in the house.
Stephen Sleeman's personal insights shed new light on many of the well-known aspects of the scandal, from Joey's denials of the affair.
Amy Fisher is a liar.
Her relationship with Joey, she told me that she was dating this guy. She really loves him and really wants to spend time with him.
To Amy's portrayal of being an innocent girl led astray by an older man.
Amy told me she was an escort. She told me I sleep with guys and they pay me money. It's like $200-300 an hour.
And they settle once and for all whether Amy Fisher's shooting of Mary Jo Buttafuoco was an accident or an assassination attempt.
That's what she wanted. She wanted her dead because she thought she was going to be with Joey, and that's what she planned.
In 1992, 17-year-old Amy Fisher, whom the press dubbed the Long Island Lolita, shot the wife of her older lover, Joey Buttafuoco, in the head.
That was the end of my life as I knew it.
The victim, Mary Jo Buttafuoco, miraculously survived despite disfiguring injuries. The incident quickly erupted into one of the highest-profile scandals to hit the media.
You know, every day there was some new piece of information coming out, some more incredible than the last.
This was ripe for made-for-TV because you have a 17-year-old white upper-middle-class girl and a Goomba-looking Buttafuoco last name, 36-year-old man, and the dopey housewife who hasn't got a clue as to what's going on.
It was a story of he said, she said, with contradicting allegations coming from Amy.
I hit her on the back of the head, and the gun went off.
Joey.
Amy Fisher is a liar.
And Mary Jo.
This is a lie. Everything she's saying is a lie.
It became that Amy was now under the spell of Joey, and that now Joey is the bad guy, and poor Amy. But poor Amy came to my house and shot me in the head.
Decades after the shooting and media frenzy that followed, will the truth ever come to light? According to Stephen Sleeman, a former friend of Amy Fisher's, certain aspects can. He told authorities a far different and far more damning story about Amy's involvement, starting with her claim that the shooting was accidental.
Her shooting with Mary Jo was definitely not an accident. It was definitely premeditated. She thought about it. She wanted to do it. In her mind, that's what she wanted. She wanted her dead.
Not only that, but Sleeman claimed that Amy paid him for 2 attempts on Mary Jo's life that were made before Amy launched her own deadly assault.
I can't believe it all happened the way it did. It's impacted a lot of families and a lot of lives. If I could tell myself, my younger self, don't get involved I would definitely not have said yes with what I know now.
At first glance, the tight-knit community of Massapequa, located on Long Island, New York, seemed to be an unlikely place for a scandal that included infidelity, teenage prostitution, and attempted murder.
Massapequa, Long Island was very quiet, it's a normal place.
I would describe Massapequa as a probably upper middle class area, and it's kind of quiet. It's colonial homes and pretty streets.
It was here where the married Joey and Mary Jo Buttafuco, along with their 2 children, lived.
Everybody knew Joey, everybody knew me, and, people thought we were terrific together. He loved everybody. He seemed to love everybody. He let everybody know that he cared. That's the game. That's how you get pulled in. He makes you think that you're the most important person in the world.
Joey Buttafuco worked at his family's business, Complete Auto Body and Fender. One of his regular customers was a man named Elliot Fisher. On some of his visits to the shop, Elliot brought along his teenage daughter, Amy. According to Amy, Joey began to notice her when she was 15.
I think Joey Buttafuco was attracted to Amy Fisher because she was young and beautiful.
Amy, the only child of Elliot and Roseanne Fisher, lived in nearby Merrick, New York. She claimed that her parents overindulged her, and on her 16th birthday, they gave her a $20,000 sports car. According to Amy's account, her car was vandalized and damaged on Halloween night, 1990. She took it to Joey Buttafuco for repairs. Joey allegedly asked Amy if she wanted him to put pinstriping on the vehicle. When Amy worried that the cost would be too expensive, Joey reportedly told Amy that he'd take care of it. 7 months later, in May 1991, Amy was running late for school. In a hurry to get to class, she damaged her car as she backed out of the garage. Fearing her father would take her car away if he found out about the accident, she turned to the one adult she felt she could trust, 35-year-old Joey Buttafuco.
Whenever something goes wrong with a car, she brings it to him and he fixes it.
According to Amy, Joey suggested she tell her father that her car was damaged when it was parked at a local mall. Elliot Fisher fell for the ruse and paid for the damages. 6 weeks later, in July 1991, Amy experienced another fender bender. She once again brought her car to Joey to repair.
And she was a reckless driver, and she kept going back to him. She repeatedly went into the auto body shop. Now, whether he seduced her, she seduced him, I think it was probably mutual.
I would believe she was experienced at 16. What brought her to where she was, I don't know, but she was available to Joey when she walked into that body shop.
Amy arrived at the shop to pick up her car, but after being told the repaired vehicle wasn't ready, Joey gave her a ride home. Amy's parents were at work at the time, and according to her account, she showed Joey around the house and things became physical. Although married and almost 20 years her senior, Joey began a sexual affair with Amy, who was only 16 at the time.
It's not that every 16-year-old would have been wound up in bed with Joey Buttafuco. Amy Fisher was a prime 16-year-old.
To contact Amy for trysts, Joey would page her.
I remember his code was 007 for her. She would call him, and that's how they would communicate.
They were, very hot for each other.
Joey's wife, Mary Jo, had no idea her husband was having an affair with a high school senior.
One of the things that I was attracted to with Joe was his ability to talk. He loved to talk. And a lot of men are not talkative or share their feelings and all. And I thought, how lucky am I? What a lucky woman I am to have a man who shares his feelings with me and shares his thoughts with me. And I realize now it was just all jabber. It was all jabber to keep me off guard. That's the behavior of a sociopath. They can charm the snakes out of the trees. That is one of the traits about Joe that I loved so much about him. And he was very, very good at it, as most sociopaths are.
By most accounts, Amy fell head over heels in love with Joey and envisioned a future with him. However, there was an obstacle in her way: his wife, Mary Jo.
Joey would never leave his wife. He's Italian and Catholic. You don't do that, back in the day. You stay married and, guys like that don't get divorced.
But when Joey wouldn't leave Mary Jo, Amy began looking for the means to settle the issue herself.
She had been looking for a gun for a period of time.
Amy asked friend Chris Drellos if he had a gun. He didn't, but he said he knew someone who did. Friend Stephen Sleeman, age 21.
Chris introduced me to Amy because Chris knew I had a gun. I had a .22 hunting rifle.
Chris Drellos took Amy Fisher to the restaurant where he and Stephen Sleeman worked to introduce the pair.
When I first met her, she was really nice, really sweet girl. Great personality and everything. She was very pretty, really good-looking girl.
Sleeman and Amy Fisher developed a friendship, and Amy shared with him the details of her life.
As time went on, we became really close, and it got personal between me and her. We spent a lot of time together. Her relationship with Joey, she told me that she was dating this guy. He's a mechanic or an auto body guy. She really loves him and really wants to spend time with him.
Joey Buttafuocco would later deny this relationship to the press. In Amy's eyes, there was one thing preventing her from spending more time with Joey: his wife, Mary Jo.
Amy asked me to watch Mary Jo, get her schedule, see what time her kids went to school, what time they get off the bus, and what time they got on the bus. She just asked me to follow her and just keep tabs on her. I agreed to do it because I was young and I had nothing better to do. And she's a hot chick. And she'd pay me here and there, a few $100s here, a few $100s there. And whatever I asked, she's like, I got money, don't worry about it.
But how could a teenage girl without an apparent steady job come up with so much cash?
Amy was able to pay me the money because she told me she was an escort.
In her book, If I Knew Then, Amy Fisher claimed Joey Buttafuocco got her involved in prostitution at the age of 17.
He was very aware that she wanted money. And, maybe he wanted to be let off the hook because he was giving her money. It might have gotten to the point where his wife might have suspected it at the time.
Amy began generating her own income through prostitution.
She told me I talk to guys, I sleep with guys, and they pay me money. It's like $200-300 an hour. I said, oh, really? And she says, yeah, I just give them what they want, and they throw money at me. And a few times she asked me to drive her to some of these places, and I said, yeah, I'll drop you off, and pick you up. That's not a problem for me. And she paid me for my time.
Amy claimed that Joey blackmailed her to continue working as an escort by threatening to tell her father about her activities. However, the book Lethal Lolita alleged that Amy bragged about her job and the money she made to friends at school.
We knew that by Amy's own admission that she was employed by the escort service. I never got any credible information that Mr. Buttafuocco had a role in her becoming an escort. Could be, maybe not. I mean, he's certainly associated with people in that area.
Meanwhile, Stephen Sleeman began performing the job Amy Fisher hired him to do, surveilling the comings and goings of Mary Jo Buttafuocco.
I found Amy's request to be a little strange, but what did I care? I was getting paid. She's paying me for my time. She did ask me reports on Mary Jo's activities. We talked about what time she went to the store, what days, what time her kids got on the bus, what time they got off. She asked what she does during the day. Most of the time, I said she stayed at home. She barely went out. She was a housewife. Amy did show me a picture of Mary Jo. And she said, hey, what do you think of her? And I said, she's okay, And then I remember her asking, do you think I'm prettier? I said, yeah, you're prettier than her.
The affair between Joey Buttafuocco and Amy Fisher continued. With Joey unable and unwilling to leave his wife, Mary Jo, for his teenage lover, Amy made a new request to friend Stephen Sleeman.
When she asked me to shoot Mary Jo, I just thought she was bluffing. I didn't really think it was, anything real. I said, yeah, whatever, no big deal. We'll go ahead with it. But I never actually thought it would ever come down to that.
According to Sleeman, Amy Fisher offered him two things in exchange for shooting Mary Jo Buttafuocco: cash and the promise of sex.
We kissed here and there. Oral sex, maybe once or twice, that's about it. I was young then, and I was just wanted to get laid, so I agreed to whatever she wanted, you know.
Uncertain if Amy's request was a joke, Sleeman procrastinated over the shooting.
My excuses were I was too busy or I have other things to do, you know. I had school, you know, 'cause I just started college that fall, and I was like, I have a lot of things to do. Her reactions were like, she started getting mad because I kept blowing her up, but I kept telling her I have other things to do, and I kept putting her on the back burner.
On November 1st, 1991, Amy Fisher had had enough of Stephen Sleeman's excuses. She personally escorted her reluctant hitman to the Buttafuocco home. Inside Stephen's car, Amy laid out her plan. Posing as a student selling candy for a high school fundraiser, she would lure Mary Jo Buttafuocco out of her house.
She wanted to sell candy and just to get Mary Jo outside. And then she said, oh, you should hide in the bush and shoot her. And I was like, okay, whatever.
At the Buttafuocco home, Amy headed to the front door, while Stephen Sleeman took a position nearby.
Amy knocked and Mary Jo came out, and I was hidden towards the back of the bushes.
As Mary Jo fell for Amy's ruse of selling candy, Amy allegedly gestured to Stephen Sleeman to shoot Mary Jo. That's when it dawned on Sleeman that what he thought was probably a joke was anything but.
And I didn't think she was all that serious until we got to that house, you know. Then I knew that this girl was definitely crazy. You have to do this. I paid you this money and, you know, you owe me. I went back to the Buttafuocco home weeks later. It was a Wednesday. It was the day before Thanksgiving. I remember it was early morning. And I remember Amy waiting down the block for me, making sure I did the job.
Sleeman aimed his rifle at the Buttafuocco home.
I saw a faint shadow, but I didn't know who it was. It was too far of a distance. I just aimed at the house just to shut that girl up. I pulled the trigger twice and put 2 rounds in the house. And I just drove away after that. Amy was there down the block, and when I pulled away, she pulled away too.
No one in the Buttafuocco home was harmed in the attack. For years, Mary Jo would believe the bullet holes to be the work of mischievous teenagers. Over the following months, Mary Jo's husband, Joey, continued his affair with Amy Fisher, but he allegedly grew aloof and spent less time with her. Since friend Stephen Sleeman had been unable to get Mary Jo out of the picture, Amy turned to another young man she thought could help, 21-year-old Peter Guaginti. Like Sleeman before him, Guaginti owned a gun. On May 19, 1992, approximately 6 months after Stephen Sleeman shot 2 bullets into the Buttafuocco home, there was another attempt on Mary Jo Buttafuocco's life. But this time, Amy Fisher took matters into her own hands.
She was tired and no one else was gonna help her. If she wanted something done, she would have to do it herself. And that's what drove her to that day.
Everybody in Buttafuocco had one of those, so no bells are going off in my head. And I kind of was like, I don't know what this is. I'm gonna go in and call Joe. And I kind of said to her, look, I don't know what you want me to say or do about this. I said, but I'll go in and I'll call Joe and I'll tell him what you told me, and there you go. And I actually said, like an idiot, I said, thanks for coming by, because I didn't know what else to say.
When Mary Jo turned to go back inside, Amy took out the gun she'd gotten from Peter Guagenti.
I felt an explosion. My last conscious thought was, where did she get the bat? Because that's what it felt like, that somebody had taken a baseball bat and hit me, but it didn't hurt. It was what was so odd. And it was like that. It was just that quick. I turned away. And I never saw a gun. I never saw her threaten. She didn't threaten me with anything. I just turned and I put my hand on the door to open it. And that was the end of it. That was the end of my life as I knew it.
Amy and Peter Guagenti, the friend who sold her the gun, fled before they were seen. The sound of the gunshot alerted Mary Jo's neighbors.
Thank God my neighbor directly across the street was a retired New York City police officer. And he came outside and he started walking toward me. And he said, I thought you were laying on a red blanket. That was the first thing, because all I saw was red. And as I started to register, he realized it was blood, and he came toward me, and I was face down.
An unconscious Mary Jo was quickly airlifted to a hospital, but with no eyewitnesses to the crime, the police had no leads.
The husband's accounted for, he had an alibi, so he didn't do it. Who else would have done this? What other enemies did she have?
Everybody is just taken aback, because in our little town, how could that be?
After several hours in surgery, Mary Jo's condition stabilized. Miraculously, she survived the shooting. To this day, the bullet remains lodged in her head.
I was very, very lucky. I turned and I was going for the door, so I moved and the bullet went in right here, right here. This is where it is. And luckily, it slammed into my temporal mandibular joint. But because of it hitting that bone, it shattered and went down. Instead of going through my head or going through my brain, it went in a downward spiral. So it went through and the force, it went down and it broke into a lot of little pieces. And I often think if I had turned to look at her, this is where it would be. This is where it would have hit.
Stephen Sleeman was the friend Amy had hired to shoot Mary Jo in 2 previous failed attempts. When word of the shooting reached him, he had no question about who pulled the trigger.
When his service came and said, some lady got shot in Massapequa. And then I said, oh my God, that had to be Amy Fisher. I couldn't actually believe she actually went through with it. And I was like, wow, this is crazy.
As Mary Jo recovered in the hospital, police were desperate for any descriptions of her attacker.
As I started to come more and more into consciousness and awareness, they were right on top of me, grilling me. I couldn't speak in the beginning, but because I knew I was so determined to tell them, I made a motion of writing, because I had to tell them what I knew.
Mary Jo described her attacker as a 19-year-old girl named Anne Marie, the false name Amy Fisher had given her. She also mentioned the t-shirt Amy had brought along.
It was the t-shirt from Complete Auto Body that Mr. Buttafuocco had a reaction to and made an admission that he had given that t-shirt to Mr. Fisher's daughter, Amy, and then things started to fall into place.
Joe never went like he was as smooth as silk. He immediately said, that's Amy Fisher. He very willingly gave up who this girl is and where she lives and everything. He gave it up willingly, like to help. Somehow they got a picture of her, very nondescript, teenage girl with long brown hair, and I said, that's her.
Though he would later deny it, detectives said at the time that Joey confessed he was having an affair with Amy. They would use his relationship with her to orchestrate Amy's eventual arrest.
Joey had paged her, and she called him, and the cops were there, and they discussed something that would get her out of the house. And once the police were surveilling her home, they saw her drive away, they followed her for a mile or so, at which point they pulled her over.
On May 21st, 1992, Amy Fisher was arrested for the attempted murder of Mary Jo Buttafuocco. When the story broke in the media, Amy garnered the nickname, the Long Island Lolita. Lurid headlines, whispers, and stories about Amy and Joey's affair spread like wildfire. Video of Amy working as a teenage prostitute even surfaced when someone sells the footage to a television show. The story became national news.
He had the wife, and she was going to kill the wife, and the eternal triangle and all that. I know the public's fascinated with it.
The media attention led Stephen Sleeman, the would-be hitman in 2 previous failed attempts on Mary Jo's life, to come forward.
I went home and told my dad, I said, I think I'm involved in this Amy Fisher case thing. And he goes, how bad and how much are you involved in this Amy Fisher case? I said, really, really involved.
Sleeman's father employed attorney Bruce Parnell, who sought immunity for his client in exchange for helping the prosecution.
Bruce said, all right, let's get everything out and see what's going on. And one thing led to another, and then someone leaked my name to the media, and my normal life turned into a 3-ring circus. My whole family was in the middle of it, and they really knew nothing about it until the media showed up on the front lawn. The only one who really knew anything about it was my dad. My mom didn't really anything. She knew nothing about it. She was totally clueless until we actually did one of the interviews. I think it was Current Affair or something like that we did. I told her, don't watch TV tonight. It's the first time the news broke. We were actually had an interview with the district attorney, Fred Klein. I had to escape out the back door, and it was just so crazy. He said, just put a jacket over your head, so because they didn't know who I was yet. And we tried to escape and try to keep it quiet. And it didn't really work out that well.
Stephen Sleeman also found himself the subject of such headlines as Amy's horny hitman and paid me in sex.
When these headlines came out, I didn't pay much attention to any of it. The only thing I paid attention to was what my lawyer was telling me to say and do. And he said, just ignore everything. It's just all show.
It wasn't long before Amy turned on Joey and claimed that he knew all along of her plan to confront Mary Jo with a gun.
Amy Fisher was a victim of Joey Buttafuocco. Do you think that a 16, 17-year-old girl did this on her own without anybody feeding her in? She came up with the idea that Joey and I are going to be together forever? No.
It became that Amy was now under the spell of Joey, and that now Joey is the bad guy, and poor Amy. But poor Amy came to my house and shot me in the head. I didn't have much sympathy for her.
Joey insisted he had nothing to do with the shooting of his wife, and even denied ever having a sexual relationship with Amy.
Amy Fisher is a liar and has zero credibility.
When I think back to that time, anger was probably the motivator that kept me getting up every morning. Just sheer anger at the whole situation. This is my house. This stupid kid came to my house. Joe was like the last thing on my mind. I hated her. I hated what she did. You ruined my lovely, perfect little life. And as you can see, I blamed her for all of this. Not Joe, I blamed her at the time.
Amy Fisher previously told Stephen Sleeman that she and Joey had indeed had a relationship.
She told me that she was dating this guy, Joey. He's a married guy.
Amy pleaded not guilty to the charges and claimed that she had only meant to hit Mary Jo with the gun when it accidentally went off. Stephen Sleeman disputed this claim.
Her shooting with Mary Jo was definitely not an accident. It was definitely premeditated. She thought about it. She wanted to do it. In her mind, she wanted her dead.
Mary Jo Buttafuocco was released from the hospital. The shooting had left her deaf in one ear and with half of her face paralyzed.
When I saw it on the news, I felt for her. This is something that happened because some crazy girl wanted to be with your husband, out of jealousy.
Mary Jo was quick to come to Joey's defense against allegations of his affair with Amy.
This is a lie. Everything she's saying is a lie. And now she's taken my husband, and she's taking him, and she's trying to destroy us. For what reason? Because Amy Fisher's a waste.
I was always amazed that she stayed with him, to be honest with you. This is a guy who was playing around with a kid.
He denied on our children's lives that he had had an affair with her. He said he knew her. He said he fixed her car. He said he knew the family. I believed him. There was no question about it. I believed everything he was telling me.
Meanwhile, Amy's attorney, Eric Nyberg, demanded that the district attorney file statutory rape charges against Joey Buttafuocco.
They were in motel rooms, naked, having a torrid relationship. This is a young kid. That's why she winds up on that doorstep. I believe that. And I think Fred Klein believed it also.
My focus is clearly on the more serious crime, that is the shooting of Mrs. Buttafuocco by Amy Fisher. But yet there's such a backstory here as to why she did it. And I felt legally we had to hold Mr. Buttafuocco responsible for what he caused, even if he didn't intend it.
But at that time, Mary Jo wasn't happy with the prosecution's focus on her husband.
It's like, really? You're worried about whether or not Joe had sex with this lunatic? And this lunatic, meanwhile, she tried to kill me.
The prosecution found themselves in a challenging predicament.
So the difficult part was, how do I get Amy Fisher's cooperation without throwing the case away against her? Because to get defendants to cooperate, normally you offer them a better deal. Well, I didn't want to do that here. Her crime was too serious to give her a benefit. So my goal was to, get her case resolved in as successful a way as I could, and then turn my focus on Mr. Buttafuocco.
Nyberg and prosecutor Fred Klein struck a bargain that would give Amy 5 to 15 years for reckless assault. And in turn, she agreed to testify against Joey Buttafuocco for statutory rape and possible murder conspiracy charges.
She gave us so many details about their sexual relationship when she was 16 and 17 that really helped our investigation against Mr. Buttafuocco.
On September 23, 1992, Amy Fisher accepted the deal and pleaded guilty to reckless assault. In exchange for his cooperation, Stephen Sleeman, the friend Fisher had hired to shoot Mary Jo in 2 previous failed attempts, was granted immunity. During the plea deal, Amy Fisher still claimed the shooting was an accident.
I hit her on the back of the head. I went to hit her again, and the gun went off.
When I went into Fred Klein's office, I was furious. I was just so angry. Like, how can you say this? How can you say aggravated assault? Good God, this was an assassination. For God's sake.
I believe she meant to kill her full-heartedly. I think she wanted her dead. I don't think there was ever a doubt in my mind that she didn't want her alive. And it was definitely premeditated. She thought about it, she wanted to do it. Amy said, you have to do this, you have to do this. I paid you this money and, you know, you owe me.
Amy's credibility also took a blow when a tape of her was leaked to the media. In it, she mentioned wanting to keep her name in the press.
She said that she thought that she would get a Ferrari out of it because, you know, her story would be worth money and his story about her would be worth money.
On December 1st, 1992, Amy Fisher received the maximum sentence of 5 to 15 years imprisonment for aggravated assault in the first degree. The saga of Amy Fisher and Joey and Mary Jo Buttafuocco played out in 3 made-for-TV movies, and they all aired within a week of each other. The Amy Fisher story aired on ABC and featured Drew Barrymore in the title role. Stephen Sleeman, Amy's hitman for hire, was also portrayed in the movie.
I never thought about it with, you know, with movies or anybody betraying me because it never bothered me. I never even watched them. My ex-wife now says, "You never watched Amy Fisher stuff?" I go, "No, I never even thought about watching it." I saw it come on the TV a few times and I'm like, yeah, whatever. And we never sat down to actually watch any of the films.
The incredible lust we have for the stories about the crazy things that other people do, because we need the Buttafuocos.
Well, it's not just television, movies, newspapers, books, you name it.
Joey Buttafuocco relished the limelight and continued to deny that he had had an inappropriate relationship with Amy.
And frankly, that incensed so many people that my phone rang off the hook with people who said, listen, we really don't want to get involved, but if he wants to go out in public and start saying these things, we can't live with ourselves anymore. And we developed really good, credible witnesses who knew pretty much firsthand that he was having a sexual relationship with Amy. And that wound up leading to his indictment and conviction. You know, probably he would have benefited from keeping his mouth shut after Amy Fisher was arrested instead of constantly being on camera, constantly talking. In fact, I don't think he would have been indicted if it wasn't for his own statements.
Motel receipts signed by Joey Buttafuocco and date stamped when Amy Fisher was only 16 were used as evidence against him.
It was at that point that I received a call from his lawyer indicating that he wanted to plead guilty.
For having sex with then minor Amy Fisher, Joey Buttafuocco was sentenced to 6 months in prison for statutory rape. He was released after serving less than 5 months. Stephen Sleeman, the friend Amy had lured into her plot to shoot Mary Jo, moved on with his life.
I straightened my life out after the trial and I joined the Navy and just kept going and never looked back. Started a family and just turned the page, as they say, and closed that chapter of my life and just never thought about it ever again.
On May 10th, 1999, Amy Fisher was released from prison at 24 years old. She had served a sentence of 7 years.
I never remember Amy ever saying, how could I do this? How could I get a gun? How could I go to a doorstep and shoot this defenseless woman? There was never one moment of remorse other than for Amy Fisher. A lot of amoral people, they regret what they did, but not because they regret what they did. They regret the consequences of what they did. And if Amy regretted anything, it was the consequences.
Amy Fisher and Joey Buttafuocco's affair had made them household names, and they both capitalized on their fame.
It was kind of weird seeing all of them in the media, and I thought the thing just died down and everybody went their separate ways, and I thought it would never, ever, ever pop up ever again. I thought that part of that history and life was done with, you know.
Amy Fisher released a book, If I Knew Then, that detailed her side of the scandal. Joey appeared on talk shows and participated in celebrity boxing matches. But Mary Jo wasn't interested in the life Joey was living.
All the years that everything went on, it's like he liked the attention, he enjoyed the media spotlight. It was just frustrating to see how none of this bothered him. He actually enjoyed it. He didn't enjoy that I had been shot, but he didn't seem to empathize very much with the fact because it became about him.
And in 2003, more than 10 years after the shooting, she divorced him.
He was a media whore. He did anything, and the answer is, well, they did this to us. They put us in this spot. I'm gonna take advantage of it. We're gonna get the money and it'll help us put the kids through school. You know, it was always not for him, it was for us. But I wasn't even married to him at that point anymore. So I would just go, roll my eyes and just, oh my God.
Joey, Mary Jo, and Amy were reunited in 2006 by Entertainment Tonight. In her book, Getting It Through My Thick Skull, Mary Jo claimed that during the taping, Amy refused to talk about the previous attempts on her life, in which Amy had involved friend Stephen Sleeman. It wasn't long before Amy was back in the news once more. A porn distributor leaked a graphically explicit tape of Amy having sex with her then husband, Lou Bellera. Amy sued, but quickly settled, and appeared in a handful of more adult films.
Then they just started doing sex tapes, and everything was sex tapes. And in the interim, she had 2 more children. I remember saying, oh my God, these poor kids.
In 2016, Amy Fisher legally changed her name and moved back to Long Island. According to an article in the New York Post, she began appearing in sexually explicit webcam shows broadcast from her home. Joey Buttafuocco remarried in 2005. Mary Jo, his former wife, underwent surgery in 2017 to repair some of the nerve damage she suffered in the 1992 shooting by Amy Fisher. After all these years, Mary Jo finds herself reflecting on the lessons she learned from her marriage to Joey, rather than her horrific assassination attempt by Amy Fisher.
You know, I've always taught my children, if it doesn't feel right here, it's not right. And yet I didn't listen to that. Things weren't right in here. It didn't feel good, it didn't feel right. My ex-husband was a manipulator then and is a manipulator now. It was this game that he played with me that I just didn't understand. And he was very, very good at it. But I think that if you listen, and you listen to your heart, you listen to your gut, and you're in a situation that you don't think you're ever going to be able to get out of, you can. You can. Believe in yourself, which is hard because the reason we are victims of domestic abuse is because we don't believe in ourselves. And that's a big message to me is, you know what? You're worth it. You are worth it. You can have better. You don't need to be with anybody other than yourself, because when you love yourself, everything else falls into place.
Stephen Sleeman, the friend turned reluctant hitman, viewed his role in the scandal as a teachable moment.
If I look back on these events now, I think it's sort of crazy because now I have kids, and now my kids look at me like, you were actually involved in this, Dad? And I'm like, yeah, this has happened way back in the day. And I look at it as like, this is what I did when I was crazy and foolish. So I try to teach them to be a little smarter than I am. If I could say anything to Mary Jo, I'd say sorry. And if I knew all this was gonna happen because I said hi to one girl that I wish I would never said hi to. And that's about it. You know, I feel so bad for her of everything that she's gone through because of this one person. If I could tell myself, my younger self, don't get involved, I would definitely not have said yes with what I know now. I don't think the story will ever die down. It will just be a part of history.